Hey and welcome everyone. Today we are going to take a closer look at a very powerful mini PC by GEEKOM that could easily replace your desktop PC. It's the GEEKOM GT1 MEGA, and in the reviewed configuration, this one comes with the fastest Meteor Lake CPU, the Intel Core Ultra 9 185H, which has 6 P-cores with hyperthreading, boosting up to 5.1 GHz. 8 E-cores and 2 low power cores, for a total of 16 cores and 22 threads, including the Intel Arc graphics with 8 Xe cores, 128 execution units and a boost clock of up to 2.3 GHz. And in this GT1 MEGA, that SoC can run with a constant 65 watt in performance mode. It's paired with 32 GB of DDR5 5600 MB transfer per second RAM by Crucial, and that can easily be upgraded to up to 64 GB if you need that. Furthermore, GEEKOM includes a 2 TB PCIe Gen 4 SSD by Crucial with good reading and writing speeds of almost 4 GB per second. And it also has an easily accessible second slot for a 2242 M.2 SSD. It also supports the new Wi-Fi 7 standard and the new Bluetooth 5.4 version. The small charger delivers up to 120 watt and Windows 11 Pro is included as well. Also, we get a VESA mount and an HDMI cable in the package. There's also a cheaper version available with a Core Ultra 7 155 and a 1 TB SSD instead, while the rest of the specs are identical. Now the GT1 MEGA is pretty compact with only around 13 by 13 by 4.7 centimeters. It comes in a very nice and valuable looking full aluminum body, a real beauty in my opinion. Just look at these details. And the port selection here is just vast. At the front it offers 4 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports and a 3.5mm audio jack as well as the power button. And at the back we get 2 USB-C 4.0 ports with DisplayPort support, and they also work with Thunderbolt eGPUs as well. And we get 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, meaning you could attach up to 4 displays to the GT1 MEGA. And it has 2 LAN ports with 2.5 gigabit each and another USB 3.2 and another USB 2.0 port. So that's a total of 8 USB ports, 2 HDMI ports and 2 LAN ports. And there's also a CAN signal lock at the side, as well as a SD card reader on the other side. But let's just quickly talk about the 2 LAN ports over here. Thanks to these 2 really fast 2.5 gigabit ports, you could actually separate your internet connection from your intranet or NAS. And that grants you more performance and security while using both networks at the same time. Alternatively, that could be used for 2 outgoing connections and give you a stable connection even if one of them is disturbed or fails. Like for example, if you really need to be online 24 hours, even if your internet provider has issues, like when some digger operator cuts your fiberglass cable, you could connect one of them to a second line or a 5G router or something like that and never lose your internet connection that way. I did run a hell lot of tests and benchmarks on this little beast, and here it's important to talk about the performance modes as well, because in the BIOS you can choose between quiet, normal and the performance mode. The difference here is the wattage the CPU gets for the PL1 and PL2, while PL stands for power limit. PL2 meaning the short boost wattage at the beginning of a full load, and PL1 being the long-term wattage under full load. I tested these using Cinebench R24 on a loop. In the performance mode, the GT1 MEGA boosts up to 70 watt at the beginning and then drops down to a constant 65 watt. The CPU package was around 84 degrees Celsius, while the GT1 gets pretty loud that way with around 52 decibel at a distance of 50 centimeters. On normal mode it pulls 70 watt at the beginning as well, but then drops to 45 watt pretty quickly. But that way the CPU package was much cooler with now only 73 degrees Celsius and more silent with around 45 decibel. And on the quiet mode it boosts up to 50 watt only and then drops to 45 watt as well, while staying even a bit quieter with around 41 decibel, but higher temperatures for the CPU package with around 80 degrees Celsius, since then the fan is running a bit slower. By the way, on idle, the power consumption goes down to a total of only around 10 watt from the wall, thanks to the 2 LP cores of the Core Ultra 9, which is quite awesome. That is like 4 to 10 times less than what a regular desktop PC with a discrete GPU pulls from the wall on idle. Now, because it's really hard to know upfront which of these 3 power or performance modes you should use, I actually ran a lot of benchmarks, which we are going to have a look at right now. Since Cinebench R23 is finished so quickly with the Core Ultra 9's 16 cores, it is able to achieve an almost identical score on the normal power mode as well with the PL2 of 70 watt. Over 19,000 points for the multi-core score in the first run. The quiet mode is quite a bit slower here due to the lower wattage, though with around 16,600 points. From my experience, single core scores usually aren't affected much or often even not at all on lower wattages, since the P cores on single load usually get more or less the same wattage/performance. Around 1,900 points for the Core Ultra 185H. And these are indeed high scores even for this CPU. Cinebench 2024 or 24 is taking a bit longer to finish, so the power throttling does kick in here on the normal mode. A maximum of 1,075 points on performance and around 930 points for the normal and the quiet mode, a difference of around 10%. Again, these single core scores are basically identical, meaning everyday tasks usually are just as fast on quiet mode as on performance mode, depending on what you're doing with the GT1 MEGA by GEEKOM. And we get a quite similar outcome in Geekbench 6. Slightly different results for all three performance modes with up to 14,150 points for the multi-core test and identical results for the single core score. In the pretty long PC Mark 10, we can actually see the difference of the three modes in everyday tasks like web browsing, editing office documents, editing images, etc. A very high maximum of almost 7,800 points on performance mode versus a still very good score of 7,260 using the silent mode. Meaning if you really need the GT1 to stay silent, you're still getting a great performance here, blazing fast in everyday tasks really. By the way, the GEEKOM GT1 MEGA boots up into Windows within around 22 seconds on a freshly installed system. In 3D Mark Firestrike, there was literally no difference between the three performance modes. A high average of over 8,000 points in all the power modes. Same outcome for TimeSpy, a high score of over 4,000 points in each scenario. And even in real-world gaming situations like with Cyberpunk 2077 on low with XeSS on performance, I saw literally no real difference between the three performance modes. And the Blender benchmark running on the R graphics wasn't affected at all as well with an average score of 438 points, meaning it's in the ballpark of a GTX 1650 or RX 580 and even better than a GTX 1060 desktop GPU in this test. And in the budget benchmark for Premiere Pro, it scored between 3,872 and 3,105 points depending on the performance mode. So 4K video editing is absolutely possible to some extent, and you shouldn't run into issues thanks to the quite big 32 GB of RAM. And I also wanted to do a quick super silent mode manually by limiting the CPU's TDP to only 20 watt via the Universal x86 tuning utility, which now resulted in a multi-core score of around 475 for Cinebench 24 and a single core score of 108, while the whole system power draw was now only 34 watts in that case, and the fans have been barely hearable. While the Core Ultra 9 185H does have a total of up to 34 TOPS for AI computing, the NPU itself has 10 TOPS, meaning you can do some offline AI stuff, though I yet haven't found a way to properly test that except for the Procyon AI image generation test by UL, which is the same company that created PC Mark 10 and the 3D Mark benchmark suite. And unfortunately, Copilot is not yet working properly in Germany, so I'll yet have to find another way to test this. But for future references, here are the scores I got in the Procyon benchmark.
A small intermission from me while editing this video. I was actually using the AI computer vision benchmark with Intel OpenVINO and the precision set to integer, as this is the correct test to bench the NPU. So here are the results, and again, same outcome in all three performance modes. The NPU is not affected by the wattage.
So the performance mode is getting quite loud with 52 decibels, but especially the quiet mode is significantly quieter with only 41 decibels, while still providing a lot of performance even in gaming or demanding tasks. Only if you really need the absolute maximum, the performance mode should be picked in my opinion. And by the way, on idle it is unhearable even when the fans are still running really slow. For office workloads and browsing, it's very quiet as well, but the fan can kick in for a short moment from time to time when the CPU is under load for a short time. But even watching YouTube videos at 8K is possible in an almost completely silent way.
In CS2 I was using low settings at 1080p with FSR unbalanced in a deathmatch, and that resulted in an average of 137 FPS with 1% lows of 77 FPS. CS2 is more demanding than its predecessor for sure, and I know some of you wouldn't use FSR, but I just wanted to see if I can get over 120 FPS that way. PS, thanks to the 32GB of RAM, which also serve as VRAM, you could use higher settings for the textures in most cases without losing a noticeable amount of FPS. In Elden Ring I was again using low settings at 1080p, which resulted in around 52 FPS on average, with 1% lows of 34 FPS. There are some occasional stutters here and there, but overall it is playable. If you're okay with capping the FPS at 30, you could surely choose higher settings as well. For Hogwarts Legacy I was taking a long walk through the castle, through the landscape, into Hogsmeade. At 1080p with low settings and FSR unbalanced, that resulted in 55 FPS on average with 1% lows of 35 FPS, and it was surprisingly stable considering that was the first time I played it on this system, so it didn't even have time to preload everything, and the transfer stutter wasn't present a lot. And for GTA 5 I was actually using 1080p with high settings except AA, and the advanced settings have been turned off as well. That resulted in very playable 71 FPS on average with good 1% lows of 51. Please keep in mind that this was the single player version of the game, as the online part is a bit more demanding, but with medium settings 60 FPS on average should be possible.
Let's also have a look at how to open the GEEKOM GT1 MEGA, and this was a blind procedure, meaning I didn't open it before recording that. Okay, now as I said, this is the first time I'm opening this. We have to turn it around, and I know that the screws are beneath these rubber feet, which can be peeled off more or less easily. And there's a bit of sticky tape over here, but it's still going to work when we place it back in. And I don't know if you can see this, but these little feet, they have some nozzles here that are going to fit into this opening here. Okay, so next we're going to release the 4 screws. And this one's a bit sticky. Okay, so now what do we have to do next? I'm not getting in here, so I'm using the, no, not this one, the smaller one. No, not with that. Okay, so I just fetched some small pry tool and we will see if we can get inside with that yet. That was easy. Some small spudge. So we can take off this cover here. That's just the bottom of the GT1 MEGA. There are 4 more screws I think we will have to get rid of, not these ones. These are holding the Wi-Fi antennas. So I'm going to use my small Phillips screwdriver here. Okay, now with these 4 screws released, can we just take that off? I think we might. Carefully, don't want to break anything. Some cables still attached. Seems like I have to be careful lifting that up. Oh, okay. So carefully turning that around, because I don't want to break the antenna. And that's it. And now we're inside, and we could kind of easily swap out the RAM modules, and it's 2 crucial 16 GB DDR5 5600 MHz with clocks of CL46 and a crucial P3 Plus Gen 4 PCIe Express SSD. But the cable here is quite short, so you should be very careful when turning that side upside down. Now I'm actually going to release the M.2 SSD and see what's below that. Here's the Wi-Fi module that we can swap out as well if we want. And we're going to fully open it so we can actually take off this Wi-Fi antenna part. Okay, I might need a different tool for releasing this screw here. I'm going to see if I have a fitting one. I found this adapter and that should fit onto this screw. And please be aware, you don't need to do that if you just want to swap out the SSD or the M.2, but I want to really open the mini PC and find out if we can have a look at the CPU or the cooling system. And that worked. Carefully pull out the, there we go. the antenna. And I just released one of these antenna cables, so I will have to replug that later before putting it back in. Okay, now there's 4 more of these screw holders here, and I will just release them as well. Now we can just carefully take out the motherboard, tiny motherboard. Oh, and here we, see, here we got the cooling system, and that's quite a beefy cooler. That's huge. That is one huge fan over here. Wow, okay. So that's the whole mini PC actually. I'm not going to take that off for now, but I think that would be doable as well if you've got some experience with repasting a laptop, for example. And I can see the heat pipes below there, and the CPU should be right under that for a quite easy repasting if you want to do that. But I don't have the need to do that because it did not thermal throttle for me. So no need to do that yet. But if you have this little mini PC for a few years, the thermal paste might dry out and you would probably need to replace it. But it's doable if you're a bit careful, absolutely doable. Okay, now I'm just going to put everything back in its place and see if it still works. So that seemed to go quite well. Now I will have to take care of the antenna. There's some plexiglass cover above the connections for the Wi-Fi antenna, so I just need to get rid of that first. Now that seemed to have worked just fine. So now I can reattach the Wi-Fi module. It seemed to have worked. And now I can reapply the black tape over here. And we're going to put in the rubber feet again. All right, and that's it. Now basically just replacing the SSD and the RAM should be doable for anybody if you're a bit careful. Again, replacing the thermal paste is a bit more advanced, but if you've done that on a laptop, you should be able to do so here as well.
While I was editing this video, this Core Ultra 9 version of the GEEKOM GT1 MEGA did cost $989, while the Core Ultra 7 version was only $849. And if you don't need the maximum multi-core performance, that actually might make a bit more sense. But keep in mind the cheaper version comes with a 1TB SSD only. And with the codes and links provided in the description below this video, you can get an extra 6% off.
Now, the GEEKOM GT1 MEGA is a very fast mini PC with superb build quality, a good cooling system, a vast variety of ports, and brand new features like Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4, while it is easily upgradable considering RAM and a second SSD, or one could even connect an eGPU or an external GPU. Overall, a good package. Most certainly not a gaming machine per se, but some casual or even AAA gaming is absolutely possible with the iGPU if you're willing to use upscaling and medium to lowish settings. And thanks to the 32 GB of RAM, VRAM won't be a problem. And this could, of course, easily replace a desktop PC if high-end gaming is not your main concern, as it would even be absolutely fast enough for 4K video editing and Photoshop, etc. Now, for full disclosure and honesty, GEEKOM asked me if I wanted to test the GT1 MEGA and did send me this unit for a review, and I'm allowed to keep it as well. And if you're using the affiliate links in the description, that will grant me a small percentage of the revenue as customary. And that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and cheers.